So in this video, we're going to be going over my most controversial money opinions. These are things that the usual suspects, cancel your Netflix, the make your own coffee, the avocado on toast brigade would be aghast at. I've spent the last 15 years working with money and educating myself about personal finance, first with a degree in economics, then training to become an accountant, and then moving into the world of being an investment analyst. We're coming right out of the gate swinging, so the first one is, it's okay to live beyond your means but spend within them. Ultimately, all you have to ask yourself when you're going to make a larger purchase is this going to derail my path to financial freedom? But you also don't want to live a hollow life where there's nothing you can enjoy, there's nothing to look forward to, and you live this barren existence. So if you want to take a nice holiday, you want to drive a nice car, in my view, all of that is perfectly fine. The key thing that you need to be focusing on is making sure that on average you're not doing that. It's perfectly reasonable to overspend a couple of months of the year, but knowing that those things are built into a budget the other 10 months of the year. And so when you're deciding what you want to spend your money on, I think there are 3 key questions that you can ask yourself. The first is, are you doing this because you want to do it or because you want to impress other people? The second is, will this provide a lasting feeling of happiness, or is this going to be a quick dopamine hit? And the third thing is there a better use of your money and resources and time which you could be deploying? It's okay to overspend at Christmas, it's okay to splurge at your birthday, as long as that's not the norm, as long as, for the most part, you are working towards improving your financial situation rather than to your detriment. When you get to the point where you spend more months in the red than in the black, that's the problem. The second one is, home moving is really expensive. A report from Money Saving Expert last year found that the average stamp duty paid by UK residents was £9,000. And so my second controversial opinion is that, therefore, it stands to reason you'd want to move as few times as possible. When you move house, it makes sense to stretch yourself financially. And there are a few reasons why. But I want to read you this interesting anecdotal story when I was researching this one. Okay, here we go. This is going to be your home. The system won't let you borrow more than you can pay back because of 2008. You'll live in a nicer home, and when it comes to selling it, you'll have made more on its appreciation. You'll get pay rises in future, and if the worst comes to the worst, you can sell your house anyway. 10 years ago, all my sensible mates decided to spend £350,000 and end up with smallish, semi-detached places. We nailed ourselves to debt and spent £650,000 on a beautiful, big, detached place. The result? For 10 years, we had a much nicer home in the meantime. And I have to say, I think this example here illustrates the point that I'm talking about really nicely. And so I think there's a lot to be said for stretching yourself. But obviously, don't go absolutely insane. Plan for potential losses of income, plan for maternity leave, all of that sort of thing. But it all falls under the framework of having other good financial habits. No, giving up coffee won't mean you can buy a house. Let me explain. The problem I have with this piece of advice, apart from it being absolute bullshit, which we'll come on to in a second, is that the list of other things that will yield you much, much greater financial gain for much lower effort, I think is absolutely massive. Take renegotiating your car insurance. That is something that I personally, and the evidence shows, consistently will yield you a much greater saving than the amount of money you spend on coffee every year. Looking at your home insurance policies, making sure you're matching your pension schemes. There is just a plethora of other low-hanging fruit, which is high value, high return. And so if you've got down to the point where you have to give up your coffee, then fine, but just make sure you've done all the other things first that make a lot more sense. After you've taken care of all these high-ticket items, then by all means look at the little stuff, but just don't start with the little stuff. So what do the numbers say? Apparently the average Brit spends £330 on coffee every single year. So if you didn't drink any coffee for a decade and saved all that money, you would have £3,330. Nothing like the sort of money which would not even make a dent in the deposits required in order to get onto the property ladder. So just enjoy your coffee in peace. Being frugal doesn't work. Okay, so I'm being a bit facetious with this one. Frugality makes sense in particular areas of your life, but the problem invariably is that there is just a bare floor when it comes to costs. You will reach a point where you just can't tighten the belt anymore until you can't breathe. What you should be doing instead is focusing on your income. But the problem is, when you go through situations like we've gone through with higher cost of living, food inflation being really high, fuel inflation being really high, gas and energy prices being really high, a much greater focus on your income, the bigger your armor is, the more resilient that you can be to these financial shocks. And so I think people spend a lot of time focusing on their expenses, which, don't get me wrong, this is not me going out and saying Balenciaga trainers are a great investment. What I'm saying is that focusing on your income should be a priority over and above looking to cut your costs. You shouldn't be cutting the cost no matter the cost. I think buying a house is a good investment. And this is a very controversial topic amongst some, but no matter. That's the whole point of this video. People who view their house, their primary residence, as an investment, I think is psychopathic. The main function that your primary residence serves is keeping a roof over your head. It's where you go to bed at the end of a long day, it's where you wake up, it's your sanctity, it's your place of safety, it's where you raise your kids. Viewing your primary residence as an investment just doesn't make any sense to me. And the common wisdom from the anti-homeowner people is kind of mixed at best. If you look at how house prices have increased in the UK, if you've been fortunate enough to be able to get onto the property ladder, then actually owning a home has been a really powerful wealth building tool. There was this study in 2013 from Halifax that basically found people who had mortgages who didn't necessarily own their own home but didn't rent were on average £500 a year better off. But all of this is kind of fluff. The problem invariably becomes, what do those renters do when it comes to their retirement? The people who have bought will have hopefully paid off their mortgage when they come to retire, and so they will have a place to live. But the people who have rented their whole lives, the people who have chosen not to buy, are basically just not going to have anywhere to live. And so that means that their pension pot has to be bigger in order to have a greater income to meet those additional living expenses. LCP, who are a kind of pension consultancy firm, basically did a study, and they found that when you compare homeowners versus renters, that the renters will need on average £250,000 more in their pension pot in order to meet these rental costs going into retirement. A homeowner who has a moderate standard of living, they have, and that the pension pot needed for a renter, so this difference is absolutely huge and should not be overlooked when making these buy versus rent decisions. The second most important thing is your relationship with money. Now, we did a video about this where we went into quite a lot of detail about the psychology of money, and I think having the self-discipline and the self-reflective attitude of, if you're left to your own devices, what is your kind of restored to your default factory settings, what is your attitude towards money like? Are you naturally a spender? Are you naturally a saver? Are you thrifty? And you can spend vast quantities of mental time and energy trying to overcome your overall attitude to money. But I think this kind of misses the point. And the point that I so often make on this channel is to work with your energy levels and to work with your attitude to money rather than try and work against it. Just bear in mind that you might have to trim in other areas in order to facilitate that. So maybe you go out on the Friday nights, but it means that you don't go on as nice a holiday. Your income is the most important variable when it comes to building wealth. Now, I think that this is kind of pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward. I think the key thing that we would really want to focus on is making sure you're building your wealth, making sure that you're negotiating your salary, making sure that you are investing your money, making sure that you're doing kind of all the right things when it comes to your income as well. And I think the benefit that your income has, and it's the big benefit that your income has over cutting expenses, is that there is no ceiling for your income conceivably. Maybe you start a very successful side hustle, maybe you move into a new career and you start making more money. Overpaying on your mortgage is one of the single best investments you can make. Now, I already know that we're going to be awash with comments saying, but the S&P 500 will return an average of 8 to 12%, blah, blah, blah. And whilst all of that is true, I think there are a couple of things that are missing from this analysis. Yes, it is absolutely true to say that if you can earn greater returns by investing your money in the market than the cost of your mortgage, then it is worth doing. But I think there are a couple of really important things that are missing from this analysis. So the first is that the 10 to 12% that is very often cited all over the place is an average rate of return. So maybe it's up 10 down year, down 21 year, up 5, down 6, blah, blah, blah. And so that's the average rate of return. But if your mortgage is like 5, 6, 7% and you overpay on it, that is a guaranteed rate of return. So would you rather get a guarantee of £7 now or the possibility of £10 later? Now, the average mortgage in the UK is about £150,000, let's say over 25 years. And let's say you make a regular overpayment, pretty sizable one, of £250 every single month. Now, just hazard a guess for the sake of, comment down below what you think it is. But how much money do you think you'd save in interest and how much shorter do you think your mortgage period would be? Nope. You're dead wrong. You would save a total of about £44,000 in interest, and you would reduce the overall term of your mortgage by about 8 years and 9 months. And so what that basically does is it gives you, as we mentioned earlier, it gives you almost an additional decade to be able to ramp up your investing portfolio, to be able to really just throw money at your investing. And so that's, I think, the key thing that is often missing from this analysis. People try and be too smart with their finances. Now, in my view, this is largely a function of the fact that there are plenty of industries, cottage industries, that existed all around the world in all the various financial centres in every single country, where in order just to justify very high fees, they would use opaque language, lots of jargon, they would make things very complicated. And to some degree, this is also the way it's portrayed in popular culture. It's people screaming across the trading floor at one another. It's buy it, sell, and blah, blah, blah. And actually, for the most part, you don't need to be that complicated. You can keep your finances reasonably simple. I think for the most part, buying a single global index fund that's got relatively low fees, making sure that you're overpaying on your mortgage reasonably consistently, making sure you're generally spending less than you make, I think is all perfectly reasonable. Yes, spending money to make money is a thing. This is one of the things that we covered in another video where we talked about things that you can spend more money on to make more money. And the examples that we used there were things like having an accountant. If your accountant costs this much every single month, but then you have another accountant and they cost you this much, you pay a bit extra, but you get tax advice, you get tax advisory services, then although you're paying a bit more, you're getting much more value, much more benefit. Understanding when it's worth spending a bit more money to get a lot more value is really a key skill. Understanding the difference and the dynamic between price and value is, I think, an underrated and one of the fundamental skills when it comes to personal finance. And the final one, possibly the most important, possibly the most controversial, is there's more to life than money. And what do I mean by that? You don't necessarily, in my view, want to be the richest stiff in the graveyard. I think what is so important is balancing enjoying your money, enjoying the fruits of your labour, enjoying all your hard work, but making sure that enjoying for the now doesn't necessarily compromise your financial future. Always going back to fundamental personal finance principles, having a plan in place, having a budget in place, a reasonable understanding of your expenses and your income is just, it's the bedrock of everything that's personal finance related. But at the end of the day, having a bigger bank account is not the thing that makes you happy, it's what you decide to spend it on and the utility that that derives you. This is an extension and a sequel in some ways to another video that we've done recently. Link for that is just here. Thanks very much for watching. Peace.